The sun had barely risen over the dusty streets of Lagos, painting the corrugated rooftops in golden light. Tega ran barefoot through the alleyways, her laughter echoing against the walls, mingling with the morning calls of street vendors. In her hand, she clutched a worn-out notebook, its corners frayed from years of scribbling dreams that no one seemed to care about. And yet, she cared. Every word, every sketch, held a piece of her heart. Michael waited by the rusted gate, leaning casually against the wall of his family's mansion. Though his uniform was immaculate and his shoes polished to a mirror shine. He was only 10, but there was a quiet confidence in his eyes, the kind that drew people in without them even realizing it. He smiled as he saw Tega charging toward him, hair bouncing in braided pigtails, and the old familiar warmth returned instantly, as though the years apart had been nothing more than a long blink. "You're late," Michael teased, though his grin betrayed how relieved he was to see her. Tega rolled her eyes but laughed anyway. "Late? I've been running the streets all morning just to get here before you started bragging again." They had known each other since they were small, climbing mango trees and sharing snacks they weren't supposed to eat. She knew the spots where mangoes grew sweet and high. He knew how to make the games more fun, more daring. And in their world, that was enough. The gap between the chauffeur's daughter and the billionaire's son didn't matter here. Not when they were together. It was easy to forget the barriers, the whispers from neighbors, the sideways glances from adults who said they came from different worlds. Michael's mother often reminded him gently, yet firmly, that some friendships were beautiful for a while but not forever. Tega's mother warned her not to dream too far, not to expect the world to bend to a girl with her kind of roots. But the two of them ignored it all. They had each other, and in that, they found freedom. One afternoon, perched on the rooftop of Michael's house, they whispered secrets into the wind. "Do you think we'll ever leave this place?" Tega asked, staring at the horizon where the city blurred into green fields. Michael shrugged, tossing a pebble over the edge. "We'll leave. I'll go somewhere big. You'll do something amazing too. You'll see. Nothing can stop us if we try." Tega smiled, unsure if she believed it entirely, but comforted by his certainty. She leaned her head against his shoulder, the warmth of his presence a reassurance she could hold on to when everything else felt uncertain. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The morning Michael received his acceptance letter from a prestigious school abroad was the morning their carefree world began to crumble. Tega waited at the gate, her small hand reaching for his as he packed his bags in the family car. But there were too many grown-up voices insisting, too many rules and expectations. "I have to go, Tega," Michael whispered, gripping her hand for a fleeting moment. "I'll write. I promise. I'll come back." Her lips trembled as she forced a nod, swallowing the lump in her throat. I'll wait," she said softly, though the word felt heavy and hollow. And just like that, he was gone. The car disappeared down the street, leaving behind an emptiness that the laughter of yesterday could no longer fill. Tega clutched her notebook close to her chest, the pages that once held doodles and plans now becoming confidants for her sorrow. She learned, even at 10, that absence could hurt like fire, and that some promises were fragile when weighed against the gravity of the world. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Letters came, at first. Michael's handwriting danced across the pages, sharing glimpses of faraway cities and adventures she could barely imagine. Tega would stare at the mailbox, hope blooming and dying with each day, until her mother gently told her to focus on her own life. And she did, pouring herself into small triumphs, learning to sew, helping her mother at work, dreaming with a stubborn spark in her heart. Meanwhile, Michael lived under the weight of expectations abroad. New friends, new experiences, and the grandeur of the world pressed down on him. The laughter of the past felt like a distant echo, a soft melody he could barely remember. He excelled, always striving, always achieving. But every victory felt incomplete. There was a hollowness he didn't understand. A sense that despite the wealth, the accolades, and the approval, something essential had been left behind. Something or someone. And yet, even in their separate worlds, the bond endured quietly, like an ember glowing in the dark. Tega's laughter, her stubborn optimism, the way she made even ordinary moments feel magical. It lingered in Michael's mind, a memory he couldn't shake. And she, too, would sometimes pause her busy days, her needle poised above fabric, and recall the boy who had promised that nothing could stop them. She wondered if he remembered, if he even thought of her. Hello guys, welcome to my channel where interesting stories of love, communication, and empathy are told. If you're enjoying this already, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, share with your friends, and tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. Time has a way of changing people, bending them in directions they never expected. But in the quiet moments, when Tega closed her eyes at night, she could still feel Michael beside her on the rooftop, tossing pebbles and dreaming aloud. And when Michael stared out of the sleek windows of his dormitory, overlooking a city that gleamed with ambition, he would sometimes think of a little girl with braided hair and laughter, like wind chimes. Their friendship was a paradox, delicate yet enduring, distant yet unforgettable. Each of them carried the imprint of the other, even as life tried to write new chapters without the other's hand guiding them. And while the world insisted on separations, labels, and differences, there remained a stubborn truth. The connection between them was alive, waiting for the day it could return. The sun dipped low one evening, painting the streets in a warm orange glow, and Tega finally let herself smile again. She had endured, grown, and learned. Life had been unkind in many ways, but it had also been kind in teaching her resilience. Somewhere across the seas, Michael might be facing his own trials, and the thought brought a bittersweet hope. Little did she know that one day, not so far away, their worlds would collide again. That the boy who had once been her world, now a man with wealth, poise, and the shadows of emptiness behind his eyes, would return to the city. And when that day came, everything they had known, their childhood bond, their unspoken promises, their shared laughter, would be tested by the weight of a world neither of them could escape. For now, though, Tega walked home through the streets she knew like the back of her hand, her notebook clutched to her chest, and allowed herself to dream. Because dreams, no matter how small, were what kept the heart alive. The city seemed different now, though the streets were the same. Lagos pulsed with life. The sounds of street vendors calling out deals, car horns blaring, children laughing, and the distant hum of generators forming a chaotic symphony that somehow felt comforting. Tega adjusted the strap of her bag as she weaved through the crowd, her small fashion boutique tucked away in a quieter neighborhood. It had taken years of determination, late nights, and more than a few failed designs, but she had carved out a place of her own. The sign above her shop flickered slightly in the afternoon sun, a subtle reminder that even in imperfection, she had created something real. She glanced at the mirror in the corner of the shop and caught her reflection. Her braids were longer now, neatly tied back, and her eyes held a quiet confidence that came from years of surviving, of building from nothing. She smiled at herself, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "You've got this, Tega," she whispered, adjusting a mannequin's outfit. "All those nights you thought you'd fail? Look at you now." And then, the moment that had haunted her dreams for years happened. The bell above her boutique door jingled, a sound so ordinary, yet it made her heart lurch. She looked up and froze. There he was, Michael, taller, sharper, and undeniably commanding. The crisp suit hugged his frame perfectly, and his shoes reflected the sun like mirrors. But it was his eyes, the same warm, familiar brown eyes, that made her stomach twist. Tega's first instinct was to pretend she didn't notice. She turned to a mannequin, adjusting a sleeve as though she hadn't just seen the boy she had waited for years to see. But Michael wasn't fooled. He paused near the doorway, taking in her stance, the way she carried herself, the subtle confidence she radiated. And in that pause, the years apart seemed to collapse, bringing them back to the rooftop, the alleyways, the shared secrets of their youth. "Hi, Tega," he said softly, almost unsure if his voice would carry the same warmth it once did. Tega swallowed, her throat dry, and finally turned. Michael, she replied. A simple word that carried decades of emotion. Her lips curved into a smile, cautious, but genuine. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply observed each other, the city's chaos fading into a muted background hum. Then, as though no time had passed, Michael stepped forward. You look incredible, he said. It wasn't flattery. It was recognition. Recognition of the battles she had fought, the courage she had shown, the life she had built. Tega's heart thumped, a mixture of joy and apprehension. You've changed too, she managed, her voice betraying the swirl of feelings inside. I didn't expect to see you here. Not like this, Michael chuckled. A low, soft sound that reminded her of their childhood laughter. I didn't expect to come back like this either, he admitted. I thought I'd just arrive and fit right back into the world. But it feels different. He paused, his gaze drifting toward the street. It feels heavier. That heaviness was not lost on Tega. She noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the slight shadow beneath his eyes, the careful precision in every movement. The boy she had once known had returned as a man, but one who carried more than the wealth he had inherited. He carried absence, longing, and a quiet loneliness that money could never fill. Their reunion, however, was not meant to be a private celebration of nostalgia. Michael's family, as expected, had opinions. A few weeks later, he attended a formal family dinner, the kind that glimmered with chandeliers and the smell of expensive cuisine. His mother, impeccably dressed, smiled politely, though her eyes held the sharp edge of expectation. Michael, she said, we need to discuss your friendship. Tega, who had accompanied him reluctantly, felt a tightening in her chest. The room seemed suddenly smaller, every glance like a silent judgment. Michael's father cleared his throat. You understand, of course, that this arrangement is not suitable for someone of your standing. Son, your future requires alliances that are advantageous. Michael's jaw clenched imperceptibly. I understand, he said carefully, though the weight of rebellion glimmered behind his calm exterior. Tega, sensing the tension, placed a gentle hand on his arm. It's okay, she whispered. You've got this. We'll figure it out. Her reassurance, soft and human, reminded him of simpler days when problems could be solved with laughter, shared secrets, and the certainty of friendship. Despite the formal warnings and subtle threats, their bond began to rekindle. They spent quiet afternoons together, Michael visiting her boutique under the pretense of checking new fabrics, offering help with designs he claimed to understand, laughing at small mistakes, and sharing memories that had been tucked away in the corners of their hearts. And yet, tension lingered, a reminder that the world they inhabited now was not the carefree one they had known. One evening, as they walked along the riverbank, the city lights shimmering like distant stars on the water's surface, Michael finally spoke of the emptiness he had carried. I thought money could buy everything, he confessed, voice low. But it hasn't. Not friendship, not love, not peace. Tega stopped, turning to him. It's okay to feel that, she said gently. You're allowed to be just human, Michael. It's not weakness. It's what makes you real. He looked at her, eyes searching. And for the first time, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. Vulnerable not in the presence of wealth or expectation, but in the presence of someone who had always known him, always cared, and always believed. The city carried on around them, vendors packing up, children laughing in the distance, the occasional blare of a horn. Yet in that moment, it felt as though the world had narrowed, leaving only the two of them standing by the water. And while there were battles yet to fight, both internal and external, the rekindling of trust, laughter, and shared history gave them the courage to face whatever came next. But as night fell and the cool breeze swept through the streets, a reminder of reality returned. Michael's family would not let this connection flourish without challenge. They had plans, expectations, and an empire to protect. And in the shadows, whispers of scandal were already beginning to stir. Threads that would threaten to unravel everything both of them had fought to regain. For now, though, they allowed themselves a brief moment of reprieve, walking side by side, talking, laughing, and remembering that some bonds, no matter how stretched by time or circumstance, could endure the trials that life threw at them. The anticipation of what was to come lingered like electricity in the air. A promise of tests, revelations, and a choice that neither could avoid. And somewhere deep down, both Tega and Michael knew that the coming days would demand more than friendship. They would demand courage, trust, and perhaps the kind of love that could survive even the harshest storms. The first headline hit like a thunderclap: Billionaire family empire accused of massive fraud. The words sprawled across screens, newspapers, and social media, igniting whispers, outrage, and disbelief. Lagos felt the tremor of it. The city that once admired Michael's family now watched them with suspicion, speculation, and judgment. The streets hummed with gossip, and every corner of Tega's neighborhood seemed to echo the same question. Could the man she knew as a child really be tied to something so monstrous? Tega stood behind the counter of her boutique, a half-sewn blouse clutched in her hands. Her heart pounded, not just for Michael, but for the storm that threatened to consume him entirely. Her mind raced. She had watched him from afar over the years, imagining the life he led, luxurious, polished, untouchable. And yet, she had also glimpsed the hollowness in his eyes, the loneliness hidden behind wealth. Now, it all collided in a public spectacle of scandal. She didn't wait for someone to explain the situation, nor did she ask for validation. Tega knew Michael, the boy who had once shared mangoes and rooftop secrets with her, the man who had grown but still carried the same quiet warmth, and she made a choice. She would stand by him. That evening, she found him in the high-rise office overlooking the city, his silhouette outlined by the glow of the skyline. He was on the phone, speaking rapidly, his voice clipped, tense, frustrated. The man she saw wasn't the carefree boy she remembered. He was a man cornered, under siege, weighed down by public scrutiny and betrayal from those he had once trusted. "Michael," she said softly, stepping into the room. He glanced up, his eyes momentarily softening before the weight of the situation returned. "Tega," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "You shouldn't be here." "I've been here all along," she replied gently, moving closer. "Not by your side for the world, but by your side for you. I don't care about the headlines, the money, or what everyone thinks. You need someone who remembers who you really are." He looked at her, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through the steel he wore like armor. "But it's complicated. Everyone is turning against me. Even my friends, the ones I thought would stay, they're gone." Tega reached out, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "You're not alone. I'm not going anywhere. We'll get through this together." Her words, simple yet steadfast, carried a gravity that no wealth could match. And so the trial of loyalty began. Tega navigated the storm carefully, helping Michael without drawing attention to herself. She contacted old colleagues, vouched for his integrity, and quietly patched together fragments of evidence that might help him weather the public backlash. She didn't do it for praise, for reward, or for recognition. She did it because she remembered the boy who had believed in her when the world said she couldn't. The days blurred into nights filled with phone calls, meetings, and quiet moments of reflection. Michael, meanwhile, wrestled with a swirl of conflicting emotions: pride, fear, frustration, and an unfamiliar tenderness for Tega, all mingling into a cocktail that left him exhausted but awake in ways he had never experienced. He noticed how she moved among his staff, calm, strategic, and quietly assertive. Her laughter, soft and rare, reminded him of simpler times. And her gaze, unwavering, reminded him that some connections could not be severed by time, circumstance, or scandal. One evening, as they pored over documents and lists, Michael finally broke the silence. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've stayed when everyone else walked away. You've risked your reputation, your business, everything." Tega smiled faintly, brushing back a stray braid. "It's okay to feel overwhelmed," she said gently. "But love, real care isn't measured by risk or reward. You've got this. We've got this." Her presence, her unwavering support, became a lifeline. Michael began to realize that the world he had built, glittering and vast, could crumble in an instant. But the care of one person, one who had loved him without expectation, could endure anything. He felt the hollowness inside him start to shift, the emptiness giving way to something warmer, more human. The media frenzy intensified. Scandalous rumors tried to paint him as cold, greedy, and heartless. Business partners withdrew support. Socialites whispered at gala events. And yet, through it all, Tega remained steadfast. Her quiet courage, her refusal to bow to fear or social expectation, became his anchor. But loyalty is never without its tests. One evening, a subtle threat arrived, hidden in a sleek envelope bearing an unfamiliar logo. A single line was typed neatly inside: "Step back, or your friend will pay the price." Tega's hand trembled as she read it, but only for a moment. She looked up at Michael, determination hardening her expression. "I'm not stepping back, not now, not ever." Michael felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. The boy who had once shared rooftops and alleyways now stood before him as a woman of strength and courage he had never fully appreciated. And in that moment, he understood she wasn't just helping him because she cared. She was showing him the value of loyalty, of empathy, and of love that transcended wealth, expectation, and fear. The next weeks were a whirlwind of late-night strategy sessions, whispered plans, and quiet victories. Slowly, fragments of evidence surfaced, proving errors, mismanagement by others, and the manipulations that had led to the scandal. Michael's family began to see, reluctantly, the depth of Tega's dedication. Even some of his closest advisors, who had doubted her capabilities, were forced to acknowledge her insight and tenacity. Yet, the emotional stakes remained high. He realized that Tega had always been the constant in his life, the only person who had stood by him without expectation. And as the world clamored for scandal and spectacle, he learned the quiet, profound power of someone who simply cared. Late one night, overlooking the city from his penthouse balcony, Michael whispered to himself, almost in disbelief, "I've been chasing wealth, respect, and success. But all this time, it was her I needed." Tega, standing nearby, smiled softly, sensing the change in him. She knew he was beginning to see the truth that money could build empires, but it could not build hearts. That success was hollow without care, without empathy, without loyalty. The scandal, though still raging in the background, no longer seemed like an insurmountable threat. With Tega by his side, Michael felt prepared to face whatever came next, not because of wealth, status, or power, but because of the steadfast courage of someone who had never abandoned him. And yet, even as hope began to bloom, a shadow lingered on the horizon. The family, still wary and protective of their empire, would not easily relinquish control. Friends might falter, enemies would watch, and the world, hungry for drama, would always demand more. But for now, loyalty had triumphed, hearts had opened, and the first steps toward real love and understanding had begun. The city was quiet that morning, the hum of generators and distant traffic muted by the soft drizzle falling from the sky. Michael stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his family's penthouse, the rainfall reflecting off the glass like tiny diamonds, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the wealth surrounding him, the sleek furniture, the gleaming floors, the art that cost more than a house, suddenly seemed hollow, echoing emptiness rather than satisfaction. Tega entered quietly, her presence soft but grounding. She carried a small tray of tea, the aroma comforting and familiar. "You've been staring at the rain for an hour," she said gently, placing the tray beside him. "What's on your mind?" Michael looked at her, eyes tracing the lines of her face, the determined set of her shoulders, the warmth radiating quietly but unmistakably. "I've been thinking," he murmured, "about everything I've chased and everything I've missed." Tega sat beside him, the rain tapping softly against the glass. "It's okay to feel that," she said. "You've got so much. But you're realizing now that not all of it matters. You're human, Michael. It's okay to start seeing what really counts." He let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "I've been blinded by money, by titles, by expectation. I thought success would fill the void, but it hasn't. It's only made me lonely. You've reminded me of something I almost forgot." His voice faltered, raw and unguarded. Tega tilted her head slightly, curiosity and warmth in her eyes. "That love isn't measured by wealth," he admitted. "It isn't measured by mansions, cars, or social standing. It's measured by sacrifice, loyalty, empathy. By someone who sees you for who you really are." He paused, searching her face. "And I finally understand that. I finally see that you were always that person for me." Tega felt a quiet swell of emotion, a mixture of relief, joy, and a pang of long-held longing. Michael. How could she capture years of separation, of shared memories, of unwavering loyalty, in a single syllable? Instead, she reached for his hand, her touch light but steady, grounding him. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of meaning, of recognition, of hearts that had waited too long to be heard. Michael's gaze lingered on her, taking in the strength she had cultivated, the grace she carried, and the courage it took to stand by him when the world turned away. "You've taught me more than anyone else ever could," he said finally. "About patience, about courage, about what it means to truly care." Tega smiled softly, warmth spreading through her chest. "You've always had it in you too," she said. "You just needed someone to remind you. Life, it's funny that way. Sometimes the answers are right in front of you, but it takes everything falling apart to make you see them." Outside, the rain slowed, and a single shaft of sunlight pierced the clouds, illuminating the city with a golden glow. It felt symbolic, though Tega wouldn't have mentioned it. Moments like this, small, quiet, filled with reflection, often carried more truth than any grand gesture. In the weeks that followed, Michael began to reshape his world, guided not by wealth or reputation, but by what he had learned from Tega. He confronted his family with honesty, sharing not only the evidence that cleared him of blame in the scandal, but also the truth of his feelings. The confrontation was tense. Words were exchanged, expectations challenged, and egos bruised. But through it all, Michael remained steadfast. He had learned that some things were worth more than inheritance, worth more than approval, worth more than wealth. Tega, too, found her courage tested. She had been cautious, protecting her boutique, her reputation, her life. But she also knew that true care demanded risk. And so, she stood by Michael not for recognition, not for gratitude, but because loyalty and love had no other proper measure. One evening, as they walked through the quieter streets of their old neighborhood, Michael paused by a street vendor selling roasted corn. He smiled, a soft, genuine expression that hadn't appeared in years. "Remember when we used to sneak snacks from the corner store?" he asked lightly, nostalgia in his voice. Tega laughed, the sound rich and familiar. "And nearly got caught every single time," she replied, playfully nudging him. "How did we survive that?" Michael chuckled, the sound easing the tension of the past weeks. "I don't know. Maybe because we had each other. Maybe that was enough." He stopped, turning to face her fully, the glow of the street lamps casting warmth on their faces. "Tega, I can't promise that the world will always be kind. I can't promise that our path will be easy. But I can promise that I will choose you. Every day, no matter what." Tega's chest swelled with a mix of relief and joy. "And I'll choose you too," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Not for your money, not for your name, but for who you are. For the boy I knew and the man you've become." They stood there, in the gentle hush of the evening, feeling the gravity of their journey. Years of separation, trials, and reflection had led to this moment, a realization that love was not transactional, not about status, and not about societal approval. Love, they understood, was found in loyalty, courage, empathy, and the willingness to stand by one another even when the world demanded otherwise. The scandal that had once threatened to define Michael's life now seemed smaller, almost insignificant, against the depth of connection they had nurtured. Friends and family may still question their bond, and the city might still buzz with curiosity. But for Michael and Tega, the lesson was clear. They had discovered a love that transcended wealth, power, and expectation, a love rooted in the human heart itself. And though challenges still waited whispers from the past, unresolved tensions, the inevitable judgments of a society obsessed with appearances, they walked forward together, hearts aligned, ready to face whatever the world would throw at them. They had learned the truth that mattered most. Wealth could buy comfort, but it could never buy trust, loyalty, or the kind of love that could survive time, trials, and separation. The city skyline glowed in the evening light, a tapestry of gold, orange, and fading blue, reflecting in the glass of Michael's office. After weeks of battling the fallout from the scandal, the final pieces were falling into place. Investigations had cleared his name, evidence had been submitted, and even the media, relentless in their scrutiny, began to report on his vindication. But it wasn't the headlines, the cleared reputation, or even the relief that weighed heaviest on Michael's heart. It was Tega. She had been there through it all, quietly, steadfastly, never demanding recognition, never seeking reward. Her courage had been a beacon through the storm, a reminder of the values he had nearly forgotten in the pursuit of wealth and status. Sitting across from her now, he watched as she carefully reviewed documents she had helped organize. Her brow furrowed in concentration, the faintest curve of a smile tugging at her lips. She was radiant in a way that had nothing to do with appearances. It was the glow of resilience, loyalty, and love. "Michael," Tega said softly, looking up, "they're done. The report is finalized. You're free." He exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and lingering disbelief. "I don't think I've ever felt this light," he admitted. His gaze fell to hers, steady and unwavering. "And I owe it all to you. Not just for this, but for reminding me who I really am. For showing me that someone can care without expectation, without calculation." Tega's eyes shimmered, emotions she had held close, finally finding their way to the surface. "You don't owe me anything, Michael. You just needed to see it for yourself." She smiled faintly, a mixture of warmth and gentle amusement. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what truly matters." They walked through the streets together that evening, the air crisp and alive with the scents of the city. Fried plantains from a nearby vendor, the subtle fragrance of rain on asphalt, and the distant aroma of someone's evening stew. Life was resuming, ordinary, yet infused with extraordinary meaning. Michael felt grounded in a way he never had before, not through money, not through status, but through connection, understanding, and love. Their relationship, once innocent and carefree, had grown into something more profound. Shared laughter returned, but layered now with empathy, respect, and quiet recognition of the battles they had survived. Michael noticed the small things he had missed before. The way Tega's eyes softened when she smiled, the careful way she listened, the little acts of thoughtfulness she extended to everyone around her. He realized that these were the qualities that mattered, the traits that truly defined wealth in the human sense. One evening, as they sat on a low wall overlooking the river, Michael spoke again, his voice barely above the whisper of the flowing water. "Tega, I've been given so much, But I nearly forgot the one thing that can't be bought or inherited. Loyalty, love, and the courage to stand by someone that's priceless. Tega looked at him, her hand finding his. And that's exactly what we have. Not because the world is perfect, not because life is fair, but because we choose each other every day. A gentle silence fell between them, the kind that feels full rather than empty. Memories of childhood rooftops, alleyway games, whispered secrets, and years of absence converged in that stillness. Michael realized that all the wealth in the world could not replace what they had built, the unshakable bond formed through shared experience, trust, and unwavering support. The following weeks were a subtle, graceful reclaiming of life. Michael returned to the family business, but with a renewed sense of purpose and priorities. Decisions were no longer driven solely by profit or reputation. Empathy, integrity, and respect became as important as any financial gain. Tega, meanwhile, continued to expand her fashion boutique, now empowered by the confidence and validation that came from standing strong through adversity. Together, they celebrated victories, both big and small, but never lost sight of the lessons they had learned, that true wealth is measured in love, trust, and loyalty. One Sunday afternoon, the two returned to a quiet part of the city where their childhood memories lived. The alleyways were narrower now, the houses taller, and yet the echo of their laughter seemed to linger in the walls. Michael picked up a small, smooth stone from the street, tossing it lightly between his hands. "Remember this?" he asked, smiling faintly. "We used to throw stones across rooftops like we owned the world." Tega laughed, the sound ringing like wind chimes in the warm afternoon air. "And nearly got caught every single time," she teased, nudging him playfully. "How did we survive that?" Michael shrugged, shaking his head. "I don't know. Maybe because we had each other. Maybe that was always enough." It was enough and more. The years apart, the trials, the scandals, and the pressures of wealth had shaped them but had not broken them. Their bond, forged in childhood and tempered by adversity, had endured, stronger and more profound than either could have imagined. As they walked hand in hand through the streets, the setting sun casting long, warm shadows behind them, Michael realized something fundamental. Life's true victories are not measured in wealth or titles, but in the people who choose to stand by you, who see your heart, and who love you even when it's inconvenient, dangerous, or unpopular. Tega had been that person all along. And so, with the city alive around them, laughter returning, and hearts aligned, they stepped into a future that promised challenges, but also the deep reassurance of shared strength. Their journey had not been easy, but it had been real, filled with lessons about trust, empathy, and love that could survive even the harshest storms. For Michael and Tega, it was never about the empire, the cars, or the family name. It was about courage, loyalty, and the bond that had carried them through childhood and into the complexities of adult life. In the end, they discovered that the most powerful wealth was the human heart, resilient, generous, and capable of extraordinary love. Life often teaches us that wealth and success are fleeting, but love, loyalty, and empathy endure. True connection is measured not by money, status, or recognition, but by who stands by you when the world turns away.